Hello and welcome to ThePrint. Today we're joined by a very special guest, Dr. Vikram Sampath, the author and historian. He has several books to his credit. The most recent, the most notable, of course, is of a contentious figure, Vinayak Damodar Savarkar or Veer Savarkar. He's also, elected to the Royal Society of History in the UK in 2021. Now he has another book. We have that in the frame. Another book of another very contentious 18th century ruler from Karnataka. Um, this is his 10th release, and let's find out from some more from Dr. Sampath as to the findings of his book and what new revelations have come out since he researched and brought this book out. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr.
Thank you,
Sampath.
Sharan.
Now, firstly, if you can just tell us about the new book. What are the new findings or the revelations that have come out since you started researching the book? Because Tipu is a very popular personality, especially since we're doing this from Karnataka and Bangalore. There's rich history. He is very closely linked to Karnataka. What are the new revelations you find in this book?
I think I should keep the revelations for the reader to read rather than release all of that out. But I think I've tried to make a very objective assessment of this man. He is a very polarizing figure today in politics, in society. As you know, he draws very diverse reactions from people. So I think, and political parties, groups, they use him for their politics. And in the midst of all this noise, I think it's the responsibility of a historian to place all the facts and state them on record. And that's what I've tried to do in this book. It runs into 900 pages, of which about 100, 150 are footnotes and references, which shows that I've been working on it for a very long time. And a diverse set of sources, right, from within India and also outside in London, in Paris and other places. Sources in Marathi, in Kannada, in Persian and several languages. And I've tried to make a very honest assessment of what this man is. And in all my books, I believe that a historian's work is not to sit in judgment of the characters of the past. His or her role is to illuminate the archive, bring the facts into public realm, and let the discerning reader make his or her choice as to where their opinion stands about this character. And so even with respect to Tipu, the various things that come into the often debates that happen. Was he a bigot? Was he a patriot? So many things that we speak about. I would like the reader to make their assessment. Don't want to infantilize them by giving them, spoon feed them a judgment which I may have.
So first it was Veer Savarkar, and now it's Tipu Sultan. Now both very divisive figures. Now you've, is this like your way of, entering into or trying to unravel the past about contentious personalities and fix interpretations of history about these people?
I think nobody is divisive or controversial by themselves. People make them out to be divisive and use them or abuse them for their political ends. Savarkar also intrudes modern contemporary political space like few other leaders of the 20th century. And so does Tipu, an 18th century monarch whose name is still invoked in election rallies, in speeches. Tipu Jayanti, that is celebrated here by a particular political party. Some other political party opposes it. So as I said earlier, I think it is when all this surround sound and noise is there, which politicians are very good at drumming up, I think it is necessary for a sober assessment of characters like this. I don't choose them because they're contentious or divisive, but in India, sadly today, Sharan, I think everything is contentious. History is a battlefield, live, landmine, and whatever you write about, I think someone or the other will get offended. Someone will have different interpretations of it. So I think that is inevitable for a historian to deal with today.
So, in this book, is there anything to suggest that Karnataka has perhaps wrongly, or Karnataka or history has wrongly valorized or worshipped Tipu?
You see, there's been a build-up of his image. particularly post-independence. And the fact that, there's no denying of the fact that he was a very brave soldier, and he had visceral hatred for the British, whom he fought tooth and nail all his life till the last day of his life. There's no doubt about that. And the fact that it took the British almost 3 decades, 30 plus years to subjugate Mysore, which was the last bastion of resistance against British colonialism. That also speaks volumes of the chivalry and the bravery, both of Tipu and also his father, Hyder Ali, whom I dedicate a significant part of the book to. Because to understand Tipu, you need to understand his father and see how they're a foil to each other, literally. So that being said, the eulogy to him of him being a freedom fighter, someone who fought for the liberation of India and all that, I think that is literally stretching the argument a bit too far. And that's a post-independence construct where anybody who fought the British is treated as a patriot or a freedom fighter, whereas here to fight the British he was taking the help of the French, and the French were no less colonial than the British. So if not for if Tipu had won with French help, I think India might have been a French colony, and we in Karnataka may be speaking French instead of Kannada and not communicating in English as we're doing now. So so these elements, which I think even in the 90s you had that famous television serial, The Sword of Tipu Sultan by Sanjay Khan. That I think also built him up beyond what his actual character was, almost like a secular ruler who respected all faiths and so on. And these things are completely devoid of historical facts. That he had a lot of hatred for people who did not subscribe to his faith, and to communities whose to this day in Karnataka and outside, you're from Kodagu or Coorg, so you know how the Coorgis have a hatred for the British. Similarly, the Nayars in Malabar, and you had the Mandyam Iyengars in Mysore, the Canara Christians of Mangalore. All these communities still have an intergenerational trauma and memory of what was done to their ancestors by this ruler. So all these communities have had this intergenerational trauma and memory of what Tipu unleashed on their ancestors. So without taking all that into perspective, to hype up a character for political reasons and otherwise, I think was stretching the historical truth to an extent. So while one acknowledges his bravery and, as I said, his resistance that he gave to the British, at what cost did that come? How was the social report card of this ruler? I think that is also very important to take into account.
But how different was Tipu then, compared to people? Because monarchs did rule a certain way, and this is probably part of that kingship.
Right.
We've seen Marathas do this. We've seen several others do this. Expansionist, pillaging, and other things.
Correct.
So, but how does Tipu then come out as an anomaly here?
Yeah. See, I completely agree. It was a pre-modern era, and kingship is intrinsically linked with violence. And we're talking of an era where, and even now, in wars that we're facing in different parts of the world, citizens and civil society becomes a collateral damage, no doubt. But some can be more violent than the existing ones. And when you specifically target a set of people based on their identity, their religion particularly, and these are postulated, there's no necessity for ambiguity, because he actually writes this in his copious amount of writings that he had, in his own letters, in his dream registers. His manifesto, which he released in 1786, about 3 years after he ascends the throne, clearly says that the goal of my Sarkar-e-Khudadad, or the God-given kingdom, the Islamization of Mysore that was done, is to annihilate the Kafirs, or the infidels. The inscription on his sword says that the goal of this sword is to drench itself in the blood of Kafirs. And all his letters, whether it is to Malabar, to all of that, while there is the element of conquest, there is also religion being specifically brought out. There is no need to talk about unbelievers or infidels and kafirs and these words. That means you're specifically also targeting not only those who opposed you politically, but you're also opposing them on the basis of their religion. And so then it's almost like adding another layer to the violence. So all were violent is a good argument, but simultaneously some were more violent than the contemporaries is also very true when it comes to him.
Because you often make this remark that he's the Aurangazeb of the South.
Yeah, maybe Aurangazeb is the Tipu of the North. Because we always relegate the South to almost kind of, stories from the South don't come. Yeah, there are a lot of similarities in the manner in which people treat, other faiths. The Marathas may have pillaged, but did they actually convert someone from some other faith to Hinduism? I doubt if there is any such proof of anybody. Or did the Wadiyars who preceded Tipu and Hyder, they also went on conquest, they were brutal in war, noses and ears would be cut off of your opponents. But did they convert those who didn't belong to their faith? Was that done? In your province of Coorg, he writes to Zainul Abidin Shustri, his commander, that in Coorg, not only the living people, but even the dead have to be converted. So dead bodies being circumcised and converted, that shows another layer or level of bigotry.
Okay. So, I mean, there's also references of, Marathas pillaging Shringeri Mutt.
Yeah.
And it was Tipu Sultan who helped, at least this is what popular history goes by, that he helped, revive the statue of the Sharda idol back in Shringeri Mutt. And I think to this day, there are several Salam Artis that happen in various places across Karnataka.
Yeah. So that also, I mean, there's a lot of context to that. It was not the Marathas as such who, pillaged Shringeri. It were the irregulars in the Maratha army who were known as the Pindaris. So most of these armies would have irregulars who would go to different parts. And the Pindaris were the ones during the Third Anglo-Mysore War, when they raided Shringeri, they did this. And in fact, at that time, the Shankaracharya then in Shringeri goes on a fast unto death in protest.
Correct.
And that sends actually shockwaves back to Pune, to the Peshwa's court. And the Peshwa writes several letters to the Shankaracharya saying, we are extremely sorry, this was an inadvertent mistake on our side, not part of our policy. And I'm more than happy to provide the money to reconstruct the Mutt. Please call off your fast. Because if he died in fast, everyone in Pune thought it would bring disaster to the Peshwa empire. At that time, Tipu writes to the Shankaracharya saying, don't take money from Pune. Instead, I will give you. So it's also a sense of realpolitik, where before your opponent tries to appropriate somebody, you try to circumvent that by saying, I'm going to provide help for this. And in return, please pray for my life and my victory. And the Shankaracharya actually does that. He also performs a Shatachandi Homa and Sahasrachandi Japa and all that for Tipu to win against the Marathas. So it's quite a complicated scenario there. And several of these grants and so on, a lot of them were actually, it carried on from the Wadiyar times. It was continued by Hyder too. A lot of that is passed off as Tipu's grants, which is not really true. I've dealt in detail about these several grants that he has done, including this Hakim Nanjunda that is there at the Nanjangud, the Shrikanteshwara thing, a Spatik Linga, a green linga, that was actually given by Hyder when one of his favorite elephants or something fell sick. They said, if you actually go to the, Shrikanteshwara and have some incantation, the elephant will become healthy. And so that's why it was called Hakim Nanjunda, or the Doctor Nanjunda. But that also is passed off as Tipu having, given that grant. Hyder was a little more liberal in the sense that he did not care much about the religion of his subjects or what they followed, as long as he had the power. So he was a strategist. He was brutal when it came to capturing power. But the nuances of who followed what faith and so on, that was not so much, in Hyder. And that's why it's only Tipu, after he comes to power after Hyder's death, that he Islamizes Mysore. Mysore, as I said, becomes Sarkar-e-Khudadad. A Kannada-speaking, province. Persian is the court language, and Kannada is replaced. The names of all the places are changed to Islamic names. Mysore is Nazarabad. Coorg is Zafarabad. So I don't think anyone in your place actually calls it Zafarabad, but these were the names that were changed. And even the coins had Persian, numerals and so on it. He started his own calendar called the Maududi calendar, which even replaced the Islamic lunar calendar. So a lot of these almost like Tughlaqi farmans that Muhammad bin Tughlaq had done then to establish his imprint and might over the empire. We see that very, very strongly in Tipu's regime.
Because, I mean, since you say that Hyder was, I'm going by an anecdote in your book, in which I think Heather, an illiterate person, wants his two sons to be educated. He calls in a Maulvi, and a few days later, what they tell him that they've learned, and he says, what are you trying to make of him? And
Yeah.
but also that you say that Hyder Ali was, quite a liberal fellow. So where do you think Tipu, and how do you think Tipu became so?
Yeah, and that's a dichotomy. A father who was illiterate, and the only literary achievement of his entire life was to learn to sign the first alphabet of his name, which was her. And other than that, he had no reading, but he could speak several languages fluently: Kannada, Marathi, Tamil, Telugu, and so many others. Tipu, on the other hand, was extremely educated. But this incident you mentioned, right from I think a very young age, the religious indoctrination that he received, I think that those seeds of bigotry were sown very, very early in his life. And even when the British, conquered Srirangapatna, and his palace library had thousands and thousands of exquisite books, there were several books specifically dedicated to jihad, to the holy war. And in fact, Shustri, whom I mentioned earlier, he wrote an entire military treatise called Fathul Mujahideen, which is about how to make a mujahideen. And it speaks something of the fact that even Pakistan, among the 5 missiles, the main missiles that they have, it's named after Babur and Aurangazeb and so many others who are. It's still understandable that these, Mughal empire Pakistan was part of it, so they're probably valorizing them. But one of the missiles is also named after Tipu Sultan. So why would a South Indian ruler in faraway Mysore draw so much resonance in Pakistan? So it says something about what about him do people in our neighborhood actually valorize and look up to even now.
Okay. Because, is there any reference to him having started, probably the first person to use rockets in warfare?
Not the first person. Rockets were always in vogue in Indian wars. The Chinese could be credited with use of gunpowder and so on. The Mughal, Babur's wars, you had rockets. The Vijayanagar Empire used rockets. The Deccan Sultanate, the Marathas used rockets extensively. So did the Wadiyars. I think what Hyder and Tipu did was they improved the technology vastly. They can't be credited with inventing the technology. They improvised on it, which is a great achievement, in fact. So initially it used to be of paper or wood, the casing of the rocket, that they replaced it with iron. And iron in India those days was of much superior quality. It was probably the best quality of iron in the whole world. And so these real sturdy, casings, and in that when you put the maddu, the propellant inside, it could pack itself more tightly. And because of that, the thrust of the rocket and also the range that it would go to, almost a kilometer range of the rockets, that certainly got improvised. And they used this technology to kind of script great successes in several wars. And the Marathas, the British were all quite petrified of the Mysorean rockets. In fact, after his death, a lot of these rockets from Srirangapatna were shipped back to London. A lot of research was done on this. There's no documented proof that the Congreve rockets that came later were actually adaptations of the Mysore, experience. But even the rockets in England, by the time of his death, were probably 50% as efficient as what it was in Mysore. So it was a great technological advancement that they brought about. That is no doubt. They can't be the inventors of the rocket technology as it is spoken about. And Tipu had a very restless mind, so very inquisitive all the time, interested in modern science and technology. He was very curious to know how a thermometer, a barometer, microscope worked. He would get all these instruments from the West and try to, study them and so on. So those things were certainly there in his character.
So when you think of our colonial past, where does how is Tipu remembered in all of this? And, if all history is about interpretation, then how is there a wrong and a right version of history?
They can never be. I think a famous historian had said every work of history is an interim report. There's nothing final about it, because if everything about the past is already known and written in stone and the way it is, then we historians would be out of job. So every generation tries to reinterpret, revisit that history depending on sources that you come across. We depend on analyzing and revisiting the past based on the sources that are at our command, and a certain amount of interpretive science that goes into it. That's a part of the craft that we learn. But there's no right or wrong, and people like Tipu, to box them into these black and white. That's why I've not done that in the book. I've provided an objective assessment, as I said right at the beginning. There are more than 51 shades of grey when it comes to someone like him. And I think it's up to the reader to see this very, very enigmatic, very complicated character. And we'd be doing injustice to people like this by boxing them into good and bad and these hero and villain and these kind of binaries, which we are want to do these days. We want to give a tag on everybody. We want to put a label on people. Was he a hero? Was he a villain? I mean, he was both. So you can be both. That idea itself, the nuance, I think we are sadly losing today.
Okay. Because, I mean, as we speak about the interpretation of history, every time there's a regime change, we're in Karnataka. So when there is a BJP government, they want to erase Tipu. When there is the Congress government, they want to bring him back. There's a Tipu Jayanti and other things. So, I mean, what about the students of history? I mean, every time there's a regime change, then history is rewritten. And do you somewhere fit in that, this one where you're trying to now rewrite history, or?
As I said, history has to be rewritten. There's nothing absolute about the past. People keep writing. If everything about the past is already written, what do we sit and do then? What is rewriting? There's nothing. Everyone is revisiting. But I completely, even when the BJP was in power and there were all these, moves to let's remove Tipu Sultan from the syllabus. I think I was one of the first people, even to print, I had said that it's one of the most foolish things to do, because you can't wish away your past. Whether you like him, don't like him, whatever it is, you present the good, bad and the ugly to the students. You can't wish away or erase some part of your past. But sadly, history is a political, as I said, it's a new battlefield. It is a political football. And as George Orwell had said, he who controls the past controls the future. Okay. So I think all our politicians understand it, right? From our colonial masters to post-independence rulers and to the regime today, who understand that if you want to control people's minds, history becomes unfortunately a tool. And that is why I re-emphasize the fact that it is up to historians to salvage the subject and bring the truth to the reader. Whatever be the political machinations that keep going on, I have no interest or participation in that at all. I would condemn all means to kind of use history as a tool for it. But it is unfortunately a handmaiden of the ruler always.
There are conflicted versions of Tipu, you would agree to that, right? So that he was known as a land reformer. Most of the reforms that he took were against the zamindars, pro people. And these are at least some of the history popular history out there. So has your book sort of delved into this, and what have you found?
Yeah, certainly. There were certain redeeming features of his character and his regime, and the land reforms, the increase in the cultivable land in Mysore, with the ulterior motive that it also brings in the revenues, because particularly after the Third Anglo-Mysore War, when he lost miserably, half his kingdom was gone, and he had to pay a very heavy war indemnity of about 3.5 crores, where 2 crores was the state budget. It's exceeding the budget of the state. So obviously you have to increase. How do you cough up this new revenue? So all the grants to temples being taken away and diverted to paying the indemnity, and also increase taxes, increase cultivable land. In the process, a lot of peasants and so on were given interest-free loans, irrigation projects being brought into vogue, and creating a large market for Mysorean products internationally too. Like sandalwood and ivory, jasmine, betel nuts, all these things which Mysore is so famous for. It found a market even in the Middle East, where he sent a lot of embassies to Turkey and Persia and all these places. So those things were certainly there. So that's why I said it's very it's like saying, there are a lot of redeeming features of Hitler's character too. They say he was very fond of his dog, he was very fond of his daughter, he was a vegetarian. But finally, at the end of it, what are you going to remember the person for? For the barbarities, and as I said, the social report card. So today, if there are communities which still remember that, so if you have the Mandya Mayangars who do not celebrate Diwali even to this day after 250 years, because 700 people of that community were brutally brutally massacred on the day of Narak Chaturdashi. If every year on 12th December, your people in Coorg actually call it Martyrs' Day because at Devati Param, that is where thousands of them who came unarmed, they were all massacred. The Canara Christians, the bishop in Mangalore and everyone were out in the streets protesting when Tipu Jayanti was, commemorated.
Correct,
Obviously, the Christians did not have anything in common with the BJP's ideology. So even if they have that memory and trauma, that 27 churches in all of Canara, North and South Canara, were destroyed, and close to 60 to 80,000, Christians all the way dragged from Mangalore to Srirangapatna, and many of them dying on the way, many of them converted, and so on. If these memories are still there, I think that takes a lot of predominance over, did you give a loan to a farmer to raise more crops? So I think that an assessment of your social report card, today we say the same. I mean, development is not everything. It is social inclusiveness and social harmony, which is as important as, just certain schemes and so on. So I think the same yardsticks must apply here.
So how do we remember? Because us growing up, we've studied about Tipu Sultan. So how do you propose that the state, especially Karnataka, I mean, can Tipu's history be divorced from that of Karnataka? Because in Bangalore, you have so much of Tipu's relics around in Bangalore. So
Yes.
how does one remember Tipu now?
Well, as I said, you can't wish away your past, and it would be foolish to not to cleanse someone of your history. I mean, this has happened. You can't wish it away. So he's an integral part of not only Karnataka but India's history. I would call him a feudal autocrat. And the wanton cruelty that he inflicted on several communities, that is a fact. But at the same time, a very brave soldier whose role in an anti-colonial movement against the British and his coming at a time in the history of India where, as the last bastion of resistance, real resistance against the British, that also can be remembered. That's why a man of contradictions. You can't, as I said, box him into this or that. There are elements of both in this. And for a historian, he's a historian's enigma. How do you make meaning and logic of his severely contradictory moves? That is also something one needs to keep in mind. But can't wish him away, an integral part of the history of not only our state, but of the entire country.
There's also something else that you say about an endangered species called the Nehruvian era historians.
I'd call them endangered. No, they are the ones who are ruling the roost, even now in academia.
Okay. I mean, do you think that it was historians in that era who then gave, Tipu Sultan that the personality, the persona that he enjoys and is remembered today?
Indeed, undoubtedly. Not only Tipu, I think post-independence, and I get it where it's coming from, our nation was born out of a bloody partition that was brought about on communal lines, on religious lines. So maybe in the decades immediately after independence, talking about a lot of issues which stirred up the communal element in the country. Maybe the founding fathers and mothers did not want that. But in the process, I think what happened, and I think Dr. S.L. Bhairappa, who's written a foreword to the book, in his foreword, he writes very clearly, he's been an eyewitness of that. He was part of the textbook committee for history and other subjects in NCERT. And he has a big debate with the chairman of that committee. And the chairman says, we're not going to talk about all these excesses of the past. Why? Because it's going to endanger national integration. That's again as bad as someone saying, let's erase Tipu Sultan. Now, we somehow labor under a misapprehension that talking about these ills of the past, talking the truth about the ills of the past, is going to upset contemporary social cohesion. Thereby, what is the subconscious thinking? You're hyphenating today's communities to these people of the past. Any community today is not responsible for the excesses that Ghazni and Ghori and Timur and Aurangazeb and Tipu Sultan inflicted. Nobody today can be held responsible for that. But the converse also should be true, where communities today should not be associated or hyphenated to people like this only because they share the same faith. And communities today also should not valorize such barbaric rulers. So if history or itihasa in Sanskrit translates to it thus happened, this happened like this. So how can you have so many whitewash the crimes of people and actually say, oh, they was squeaky clean, and appropriate them for specific communities, saying this person belonged to your faith, so he's your hero. And to make you, cultivate you as vote banks or whatever, I'm actually whitewashing all of that and negating it. History also offers a space for healing, truth and reconciliation. You add insult to injury when you even deny the existence of these barbaric actions. Repeatedly, I would like to stress that today you're not going to pin that on anybody. Demonizing today's communities on the basis of this is bad. But today's communities also should not go and valorize and worship these kind of people and look upon them as their icons. Are you then having a person who massacred thousands and lakhs of people as a role model today? How is that going to help communal harmony in the country? How are communal harmony is a two-way street. It's not a one-sided street. So if one side is actually valorizing somebody who killed all my ancestors, how can I call you my friend?
Okay. So finally, getting to, how do you now, what is your opinion of the RSS? Because
I have no opinion about them.
Okay. Because, their views about Veer Savarkar or Tipu Sultan is something that at least it comes across as you
Not
share
at all. I don't think the RSS puts in so much mind to go into the details of all these people.
Okay.
And Savarkar was not even a part of the RSS. So, as you might know. So, he has nothing to do with the RSS at all.
No, but at least, he's idolized by the RSS, the Hindutva, the pro.
Do they? And that's why in 11 years, he's not even been given a Bharat Ratna.
Okay.
So, what do they idolize?
And finally, we'll get to this part where now you say that, you can't wipe away your past, but then we see calls for raising down mosques that were allegedly demolished by Tipu Sultan and putting back temples in their places. We've seen other such instances across the country, but more notably in Srirangapatna and other places. So what do you have to make about such calls where people want to go back, erase the past, and reestablish whatever they thought was back there?
Yeah, as long as many of these, my previous book was called Waiting for Shiva, Unearthing the Truth of Kashi's Gyan Vapi, where I've actually a whole book written on the wealth of historical and legal facts on this place. It's a property issue. Suppose, my grandfathers come and usurped your grandfather's house. Today, after several, centuries, if I have the property documents, don't I even have the right to go peacefully? I don't know what whether there was violence and there were those kind of calls to reclaim. But peacefully and legally, if I cannot even go and reclaim what is, legitimately mine, I have the documents, I still cannot reclaim that. That becomes a problematic issue. How are we a free country where even legal route is not given to people? Even in Muslim countries, mosques are routinely shifted from one place to the other if you need to lay a railway line or widen a road. So if there are certain spots which are extremely sacred to one community, which has been, it is not even alleged, it is true, it is written very gloatingly by the perpetrators of that. Aurangazeb in his Masre Alamgiri has gloated over the destruction of the Kashi Vishwanath Mandir or the Mathura, what he did there, or several others, Somnath and so on. Similarly, Tipu Sultan himself writes about that Hanuman Mandir in Srirangapatna, which he demolished to build a mosque in its place. So if there is overwhelming evidence, historical, legal and others, at least let there be a discussion, let there be some kind of give and take. I think, as I said earlier, social cohesion, secularism is a two-way street. There has to be give and take. It can't be one-sided. Relationships don't work.
So, now we're on the topic of Karnataka. Let's end by asking you, the Siddaramaiah-led government in its first term, of course, restarted Tipu Jayanti. You told us about what happened in Coorg in the first year. Do you think that continuing such celebrations is a good thing, a bad thing? What do you make of these, the Tipu Jayanti and other things?
See, I have no issue. It's my personal view that I have no issue with a group of people if they form a Tipu Sultan fan club or something and go and commemorate his birth anniversary, death anniversary. It's perfectly fine. But for an democratically elected government to use taxpayers' money and spend it on something like this, where there are communities today within Karnataka which have those wounds of the past. Don't their feelings matter at all? You have to impose Section 144, where more than 4 people cannot assemble and actually then have this celebration. What sort of celebration and for whom is this celebration? And 2 people getting killed in police firing. You have the Christians, you have the the Kurgis, you have the Nayars, all of them up in arms against it. Then why do you do it? Right? A group of people doing it is fine. Now in 1947, when we turned our backs on princely states, there was some idea that we had. We could have continued to be a princely India. We looked at a modern, progressive, democratic republic. So people in the past who had a troublesome social report card, to celebrate them, I think it becomes a very big issue. Rani Chennamma or something who didn't go around massacring people, commemorating her is different. Or a Devi Ahilyabai Holkar or someone like that, who didn't, cause conversions and plunder and loot. Commemorating them is still sensible, but to commemorate someone when you have intergenerational wounds and memories of what happened to their ancestors even to this day, I think governments have to be a little more circumspect. But as I said, private individuals, it's a free country. Anybody can do anything. I can register a society saying I'm a Tipu fan club trust, and you celebrate every day of the year on something or the other related to him. It doesn't matter. But for governments to do it, I think they need to take everyone along with it. If you have to impose Section 144 and celebrate, then you must realize where the wind blows in your own state.
But the same can be said of the other side as well, the pro-Hindu groups, because there has been some, at least some riots and some unrest that is attributed to them as well. So when they celebrate a figure, a divisive figure, I guess, anyone we can say, let's go with your, this one of Veer Savarkar. There is conflicting versions of...
Who celebrates his birthday or death day? Does any state government in any part of India celebrate his birthday? Do we know when his birthday was? Okay. So was there any unrest? Was anyone killed? Okay. Did the government have to clamp freedom of movement of people to celebrate? Has even the present BJP government in 11 years, as I said, done anything to commemorate him? How many of your viewers know when he was born or when he died? But we all know 10th November was Tipu's birth anniversary. So I don't think there's an equivalence here at all.
Okay. Well, I'll ask you, the last thing I'll ask of you is, can you finally share with our viewers an anecdote from this particular book, something that you can, something that we don't know, some very nice anecdote from this book that you've been able to come up?
No, I think after writing everything, as I came to the last, his last day in his life, I think it's very poignant. It's almost like a Greek tragedy that plays out. He's sitting in a world of make-believe, and he's surrounded himself with all sycophants, a lot of traitors, Hindus and Muslims both, turning treacherous against him. Mir Sadiq, Mir Nadeem and others. And the British have breached the fort of Srirangapatna. They've just got within, hearing distance of his palace, and he doesn't know that they're there. He's busy in incantations, meeting astrologers and doing all kinds of things. And then suddenly he realizes that, the British are there, and a lot of them advise him to run away. He had plans to run away. There was a secret passage, a water gate, which these traitors, Mir Sadiq and others, actually get it closed. And then he goes on his mare along with his physician, Raja Khan. And the mare is hit by a volley and then it dies. And while trying to take him into a palanquin, both Raja Khan and he tumble over each other, and he gets stuck in the middle of so many corpses, and his leg is bruised. And he's sitting there seeing his entire kingdom crumble right in front of his eyes. There are missiles, bombs going across, mangled masses, limbs flying, putrid bodies, all of that. And in the midst of this man is sitting there unable to move. So it is almost Shakespearean kind of a tragedy, though he had himself to blame for that situation that he found himself in. And then in fact, a British soldier, the British come in, and the British actually don't even know he's the Sultan of Mysore, and their attention is caught by a very bejeweled sword belt he's wearing, and to get that they strike at him. He strikes back, and then someone shoots him in the temple, and that's how he's dead.
Okay.
And the last few that evening, when Srirangpatna has become a fortress from hell, there are bodies lying everywhere, vultures all around, and the British also don't know where he is, and nor does his family. And then a search party goes through the ramparts of hell, literally moving dead bodies, and right in the middle of this they find his body. And the people, eyewitnesses like Allen, Beatson and others, major generals, they write about how his body was warm, his eyes were open, and his hand was still clasping the sword, and they did not even know that he was dead or alive, and they thought he'll spring up and attack them. And it was only when they felt the pulse that they realized that he was dead, and a quiet hurrah was raised, and his body was taken back for a funeral. So, at the end of all the, the stormy life that he had, he ruled only for 17 years, 1782 to 1799. The end, though, as I said, he was completely responsible for the misery that he brought on himself. As a writer and as a sensitive human being, there was a touch of sadness about how this played out in a Shakespearean manner, where what would have crossed his mind on that last day on 4th of May, while sitting amidst a heap of dead bodies, to see brick by brick the kingdom that you and your father has built, which the father gave it to him and he squandered it all away due to his hubris. Seeing it break down brick by brick, it must have been quite a difficult thing for him to go through on those days, that last day of his life. So I don't know, you asked for a nice anecdote. I don't know how nice this was, but I think as a historian, I also like to get into the minds of people, because Sharan, finally, human emotions are the same. 18th century king or a 21st century whatever, we have the same love, hatred, jealousy. Those emotions don't change, they are universal. So I also try to psychoanalyze some of the characters basis their writings. In Tipu's case, he had so many, his dream register, where he actually penned down all the dreams that he saw. He dreamed so vividly. I actually got them psychoanalyzed with a psychiatrist to see what actually went through his mind. His mind was consumed with hatred, with war. There was probably not a single day in his life when he did anything other than thinking about war. Okay. Sitting in his room with that tiger toy, where a tiger feasting on a British soldier. So, as I said, visceral hatred for the British. So consumed by hatred, at the same time highly superstitious, an uncertain life which made him rely completely on divinations, astrologers, all kinds of omens and everything. And finally, dying in such a insipid, in such a unceremonious manner in the midst of battle. Yeah. So that to me is like the entire climax of his life playing out in the last scene.
All right. Thank you so much for talking to us, Vikram.
Thank you.
And all the very best for you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sharan. Thank you.